I honestly think it's coming from
those
his wife.
folks are not going to like this.
I think it's coming from his wife.
This is going around today. This is a jacket she wore to
what she's saying?
meeting.
It says, "I really don't care. Do you?"
Yeah, and this was to a meeting of the immigration
Yeah.
kids. She's meeting
What?
the kids. Yeah,
What is that? Is that some fashion jacket?
that she wore to that event. Yeah.
What a stupid fucking thing to wear. I really don't care. Do you? Yeah, I care. Yeah, I do care. But what are we talking about? What a bizarre, open-ended question. I really don't care about what?
The tone deafness of these people. They have no sensitivity to
she's
how
an
it
open
looks.
critic, though, of separating children from their families. And she actually made a surprise visit to the Mexican border today to check in on it. Yeah, to see what's going on.
Good for her.
Yeah, good. Well, she's an immigrant. I mean, this is the irony of the whole thing. She barely speaks English. The whole thing is so bizarre. Is that his own wife is a fucking immigrant. I mean, clearly. The whole thing's crazy. It's really strange. But that jacket, like, this is the sign of the simulation. Have you considered the simulation theory?
Yes.
Might be real. Might be real. It might be real. I mean,
well, sometimes I do wonder. I mean, it's like reality, whatever we choose to call it, is becoming so weird that I often ask myself, who is writing this shit? And can't they get a better writer? You know, I mean, the plot is so absurd, and yet,
I began actively considering it when Congressman Weiner kept pulling his dick out. I was like, this is just crazy.
Right.
That guy. I'm like, this is just too much. And then when Trump won, I just was sitting down going, imagine if one day someone shuts it off and the lights dim and then they turn back on and you realize, well, the game's over. How did you like it? And you're like, what? That was fake? Yeah. You just went, it only took an hour. How long did it seem? Like 50 years, you know? And you're in a simulation with artificial memories implanted into your mind. Well, the one day that the idea is that there's going to be an artificial reality or a virtual reality that's so good that it's indistinguishable. I mean, this is almost inevitable. If technology increases at the same rate that it's increasing now, whether it's 50 years from now or 100 years from now, we're going to reach some point in time. So the real question is, when we do reach that, how will we know?
well, what if we're already there?
Yes.
What if it is a simulation?
Yes.
How would we know? And how do we
know?
test it?
Yeah, how
I
do
don't
we
know.
test it? Yeah.
You know, but another aspect of this is, do we really want this? You know, do we want to be immersed in a virtual reality, even if we could produce one so sophisticated we couldn't tell it from whatever this is? Let's assume for the moment that this is reality. It's not. Do we want to migrate into a virtual reality?
My real concern, is that we are the last wave of the biological human. I really do believe this.
I'm concerned about that too,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure. I think that's a good thing.
I don't necessarily think it's a good thing for the biological human, but I feel like if you separate yourself from the idea of good and bad and the inevitability of innovation and progress, it's if human beings continue to make more and more complex electronics with higher and higher capabilities, it's inevitable that we become symbiotic with these things, that we ingrain them into our. They're going to become a part of your body. We're going to replace body parts with more efficient body parts.
Right.
And we're one day going to create some sort of artificial life. Now, whether we become a part of that artificial life, we merge with it, or it just assumes the role of the leader of the earth, one of those things is likely to happen within the next 500 years. It's just, and that's a really generous time frame.
Yeah, I think that's a generous time frame.
Yeah.
Well, this. I mean, in some ways, this is sort of. This raises the issue about, one of the things that psychedelics put in front of us, front and center, is the fact that we are getting estranged from nature.
Yeah.
That's the main lesson. We're getting estranged from nature. We have to re-understand our relationship and become a partner that's in the symbiosis with nature. And this projection is the exact opposite of that.
Yeah.
So is that, so maybe, and this raises also one issue that we haven't really touched on, but technology, which is what this virtual reality stuff is, and what any artifact is. Psychedelics are technology. Molecular biology is technology. Cybernetics is technology. Technology inherently has no moral dimension. These are not good or bad things. The way that they are used by humans, the decisions that humans make in the way that they're going to exploit or deploy these technologies, that's where the moral dimension comes in. Morality comes out of the human heart, and we are, one of our problems, I feel, as a species, we're extremely clever, but we're not wise.
Ooh.
That's what it is. We're not wise about what we do. We're not able to step back and say, well, yeah, we can download the brain into cybernetics, or we can produce an artificial body, or we can do all this genetic stuff. Do we ever stop to think about, just because we can do something, should we do something? And the arrogance of science, this is also a problem. The scientists will say, well, we are scientists, right? We can do it, so let's do it.
Right.
We can do the Hadron experiment, and maybe it'll collapse the space-time continuum, but a very small probability, so let's do it, right?
Yeah.
And there's something we have to learn. I think also that the psychedelics are important in that regard. They are ways that we can bring our cleverness and our wisdom into sync, so that we have the wisdom not to do something, even though we might be able to. We shouldn't do it just because we can do it. We really have to, as a species, ask ourselves, is this a good idea? And I think, again, the psychedelics are teaching tools for learning this and really propagating the message from the community of species.
That's for sure going to be a meme with a photo of your face that we are very clever, but we're not wise. That's for sure going to be a meme. Some dude is or gal is working on that right now.
Well, I've been talking about this for years,
but that
so it's
sentence
about time.
is so striking.
Yeah.
My real concern with this stuff is that this is inevitable. And this is just like the single-celled organism became the multi-celled organism, and that the thinking, curious monkey who strives for material possessions is designed to create artificial life. And this is just what we're set here. I've described it as that we are the technological butterfly that will emerge from the cocoon. And right now we're creating this cocoon, that we are this caterpillar, this technological caterpillar, and we don't know why we're making this cocoon, and that we are going to give birth to this artificial life, this next stage of
and that may
complexity.
Be true. That may be true too. I mean, what you say is true. On some level, anything that can be done is going to be done. Somebody's going to do it.
Right.
But so,
is it good?
Is it good? Is it good for the collective? I mean, there are always megalomaniacs who will say, "Well, I can do it. I can start a nuclear war. So why don't we do this?" And that's the tricky part. Again, I think psychedelics are important in giving us a moral compass. I mean, wisdom, not a set of rules that come out of the religious perception, a set of rules that come out of the biological perception. What is most compatible? What is most nourishing for living things? Presumably, we don't want to trash this planet. We now have the ability to do that. The forces that we can manipulate for the first time in history pose a real possibility that we could end life on Earth. I think it's hard, but I think we may be able to do it. And I, for one, don't want to see that happen.
I had a bit a few years back in my comedy act about the origins of the universe, and that what happens is people get so smart that they develop a Big Bang machine, and that someone's sitting around and some guy who's on the autism spectrum was filled up with SSRIs and antidepressants and drinking Red Bull all day. And he just goes, fuck it, I'll press it. And he hits the button and boom, we start from scratch. And then every 14 plus billion years, someone develops the Big Bang machine and hits it, and that's the restart of the universe over
You're
and over
really
again.
obsessed with this idea the universe is a simulation, aren't
I am.
you? Yeah.
I am in some ways.
It's possible. I mean, it's possible.
It is, well, it's inevitable that there will be simulated worlds.
Right. Right.
I'm not necessarily completely obsessed with the idea that we're living in a simulation, but I am completely obsessed that we are a relic and that we are on our way out. I really am. I really do think that maybe that's one of the reasons why we're so crazy and so haywire. It just shows there's no logical progression for our culture, that it's as advanced as we are, as much access to information as we have. We're also as crazy as we have ever been, if not crazier.
Yeah. So the age of the curious monkey is coming to a close.
I wonder how much of a limitation our biology is, too. I mean, you think about what it took to get to here and all the battles we had to fight and the animals we had to run from and all these human reward systems that are ingrained into our DNA, and that now here we are in a place where we hardly need them, and yet we still have them just blowing up and exploding and vomiting all over the place in these weird ways, and we have them sort of manifesting themselves in very strange behaviors that aren't good for anybody, and this constant need to acquire material possessions and conquer and obtain things. That this is not tenable. This is not something that makes sense in the long haul, but yet we still go down this illogical road, and that this is really just because this is the best way to fuel innovation. Our extreme desire for material possessions is the best way to ensure that they're going to keep coming up with newer, better things every year, which will eventually give birth to the electronic butterfly.
Well, I don't know what to say about that. I mean, it may be where we're headed, and it may be that this is a necessary step. I mean, if our destiny is to actually leave the Earth at some point, if the Earth is an incubator for life, and we're just destined to leave it and spread out into the galaxy and beyond, who knows? I mean, then maybe this is inevitable that we have to do that, if that's what's happening. But the question is, what kind of being will we be when we do that? We won't be human.
Right.
We'll be something different than human.
That's what I've always wondered about the alien archetype, that big-headed thing with the no genitals and no mouth. That may be what we think of as being the ultimate form that the human animal takes.
Right.
That if we do symbiotically merge with technology and electronics, that might be the form that we take. It's just so strange that one accepted form. And I've heard the idea that this image is something when young eyes from a newborn baby sees a doctor and sees the doctor with the mask and the face, and this is what they see, and that this is imprinted in our mind, this traumatic experience of the birth and the bright lights and the operating table. This is why so many of these alien abduction experiences do take place in these very clinical, sterile environments, and it seems like a medical procedure, as if this is a remnant of the birth process. I've heard that experience. I've heard that explanation, but it also it strikes me that these things are there. If you go from ancient hominids, you go from Australopithecus, and then you go to modern computer programmer who doesn't exercise, and you look at their body, this sort of like doughy, thin body that doesn't move very well.
Right.
It's and then you go back to this muscular ape-like creature that's covered in hair. They've lost all the hair, they've lost all the muscle, they've become thin, and then where's that going? Well, it's obviously going in that same direction. People are not going to get more muscular and harder and hairier as time goes on unless something radical changes and we need to adapt. Right. So that would be the normal. I mean, the path would be the natural progression, that we would eventually have bigger heads, because we have bigger heads than Australopithecus and certainly bigger heads than chimps or bonobos, and that it just keeps going in that same direction.
Mm-hmm. Well, possibly.
Yeah.
Or maybe we just leave the biological shell behind, but then
Where's
we're
our
really
emotions?
not human. I mean,
What do
we
we
are
have?
transhuman, and we, I'm not sure I want to go there.
I don't think I want to go there, but what I'm thinking is like, what is it that's making me cling to these ideas? Is it that I love emotions? I love illogical behavior? Do I love art? Yeah, I love all those things. I love music and food and all the things that cooking and all the things that make a person, camaraderie. But what are those things? Aren't those chemical reactions we have with other beings and natural reward systems that are built in to sort of enhance community and camaraderie so that we stay together so that the species survives? Like, what if there's something that supplants that? What if there's something that far surpasses that in terms of pleasure and connectivity? And we realize that emotions are just these ancient systems that were put into place when there wasn't a better option. But these better options, it's much better to get your food from a supermarket than it is to chase down a gazelle for 2 days until it dies of heat stroke. I mean, these systems improve over time. This animal that we are now is very different than the animal we used to be. Why do we want to stay in this imperfect state? That seems even more ridiculous. That we'd like to stay humans forever. Humans are so flawed. I mean, there's a reason why we have all this nonsense in the world, and our society is sick, and we are twisted and confused. But a part of it, at least, has to be that the human animal itself is very flawed, because there's no perfect culture. You can't just chalk it up to culture. Because if you did chalk it up to culture, you would say, well, this culture sucks. But if you go to this culture, it's amazing. There's no crime. Everyone loves everyone. It's completely open. There's no need to worry about money because everybody's generous and everything gets, and they're really brilliant and they get along and they create new architecture and everything's fantastic. It's the perfect society. That doesn't exist.
But isn't that the culture that we can create with the help of psychedelics?
Now we're
Isn't
talking.
that what we're shooting for?
Now we're talking.
A truly humanistic culture where love is what's happening, where it's driven by love and not by hatred and rivalry and scarcity and fear. And that's the whole thing. The psychedelics can be the catalyst that teaches us how to love ourselves, how to love each other, how to love the earth. I mean, I know that sounds cliche and trivial, but that is in fact what the promise that they hold for us. That's why they're teachers. They're teaching, learning tools. They can teach us to be the human beings that we would like to be. And that's the thing. That's the alternative to this hyper technological future. And I mean, I'm all for technology. I'm not against technology. But again, I think we have to we have to bring wisdom to it. We have to make a situation where, it is not controlling us. We are controlling it. And we're thinking clearly about, we have, this enormous panoply of technologies that can do so many things. We have to think about, how do we deploy those in such a way to maximize human potential, or, our humanity. So that's really, I think, what the promise that psychedelics hold out. And that's what we're hoping to create, as a kernel. And we're not the only ones, obviously. A lot of people have this idea, and it's happening. But that's the idea, is to create a place where people can learn this. And, that's my hope for the future of humanity.
Well, it's great hope for the future of the people that are alive today, and I think that's the most important. We don't know what's coming, but we do know it's here.
Right.
And I think that's a great hope for what's here.